Today I'm going to show you how I made this 1:9 scale diorama of the time the Black Keys forgot my name on the Joe Rogan podcast. And if you stick around to the end, I'll show you how it can be yours. I started this diorama by sculpting Joe Rogan's head 1:1 scale using wet clay. Wet clay is favoured by special effects artists and has been used to make beloved creatures like E.T., Jabba the Hutt and Mark Wahlberg's Langer in Boogie Nights. I used a cutout of Joe's face to capture the outline of his profile, and then I filled out the sides of his face. Many of you will be wondering, what's this diorama about? Well, on the 15th of March, I received a message from an acquaintance of mine called Dirt Davis.
What's happening, bro? I was watching Joe Rogan the other day, and you got a bit of a shout out. Well, kind of a shout out. I'm going to send you the clip now.
As I waited for Dirt to send me the link, I thought to myself, this is it. I have hit the big time. To be featured on Joe Rogan's show with his 100 billion listeners will catapult me to stardom. Up there with Mr. Beast and Pewdie Pants and those deformed Logan boys. Then Dirt sent me the link and I opened it.
There's this dude that makes these dioramas, like that are out, like insane detail, and the whole time he's like telling a story, and it's funny as hell. I forget his name.
The drummer recalled that it was something fingers, but a disinterested Joe Rogan seemed keen to get back on the topic of fighting.
Gene LaBelle was he was a judo champion, and he was like one of the first guys to do mixed martial arts.
A quick perusal of Google Analytics will show that, other than a couple of hundred additional views on my drunk Mel Gibson diorama, the event had little to no effect on my viewing numbers. Now, normally this kind of thing wouldn't bother me, but I recently bankrupted myself doing stupid shit like burying gold in Cornwall, or shooting rubber chickens out of a cannon in Texas, or getting a single hair from my arse grafted to the top of my head in Istanbul. But none of that would have mattered were I to capture just 1% of Joe Rogan's audience. But that's not what happened. My big shout out was nothing more than a damp squib. And I was haunted by the words of P.T. Barnum, who once said, without promotion something terrible happens. Nothing. So I decided not to finish my diorama of Will Smith and Chris Rock, and instead I'm making this in a brazen attempt to get the recognition I truly deserve. If you don't know who Joe Rogan is, he's a podcaster, stand-up comedian, and mixed martial arts specialist. And I don't think it would be fair of me to comment on Joe's interests without experiencing such brutality for myself. So I put on a mustard shirt, went to a comedy club, and told a lot of shit jokes.
So my granddad is trans. We call him Trandad. I guess it's better than if my granny was trans. The best thing about COVID-19 is, at least it's 19. Do you think it's better to be a gay pedo? Because in one hand, you've got this big supporting network. And in the other hand, you have a little boy's cock.
Next, I sculpted the drummer from the Black Keys. The Black Keys are a rock and roll band from Ohio in America, and they're most famous for this song.
I'm a lonely man, I'm doing all the things that a lonely can. I'm a lonely man, I'm doing all the things that a lonely man can do.
Lonely Man by the Black Keys was released in 2011 and beaten to number 1 by Radiohead with yet another song about a frightened businessman. And there he is, the forgetful drummer. To sculpt guitarist Dan Auerbach, I first needed to get some more clay. But disaster struck on my way home. Thankfully, the good people at PJ's garage were happy to fix it for me, and although they weren't as happy about waiving the fee in exchange for a shout out on my next video, they did agree to hold on to my car until I got the cash together to pay them. As I was printing out a load of reference images of Dan, I noticed that if you remove his beard and his hair, he bears an uncanny resemblance to billionaire Jeff Bezos, which is good news for me because I recently completed a sculpture of Jeff Bezos in order to build this massive Jeff Bezos rowing boat. I brought the heads into the good people at Odyssey Studios, where they were scanned by Hurtado Miras, who did an excellent job of repairing the damage I did when I dropped the drummer. While all that was going on, I began work on Joe's studio. I worked primarily from this picture, and I began by making the timber walls, which I laser cut from 8 different sheets of veneer and stuck them together on a piece of MDF. Lord knows Joe Rogan loves a moist cigar, so I made the cigar humidor for him, and I filled it with shelves positively bursting with cigars that I 3D print. I tried smoking a cigar once. It was disgusting, like filleting the wicker man. Above the cigar fridge is this thing, which is the outline of the state of Wyoming, where Joe's podcast is recorded. I laser cut that out of purple acrylic, and I cut the form out of the veneer panels to allow for illumination at a later point. Next, I made this flying saucer alien clock thing by a man called Russell Built. My cousin Wesley swears he saw a flying saucer in 2008 in Tipperary. He said he was walking his dog and the UFO flew down and there was an alien in it, and the alien winked at him. I used to believe him, but I don't anymore. He's an odd cunt. The next part was to make the table, but first a quick message from our sponsor.
A BJ's Garage is the place to be. A 10% discount if you mention me. Friendly smiles, complimentary sweets. A BJ's Garage in Limerick City.
Just pay the bill.
So Joe's table was made by Wright Smith ATX. I made this by cutting up these paint stirring sticks that I got from my local paint suppliers. Joe's table is made of white oak, but I had to cover mine in white oak veneer because when I asked the man in the paint shop were the sticks made of white oak, he said he didn't know. Prick. A podcast is defined as one or more men expressing their opinions on either a subject or not a subject, so I thought my encyclopedic knowledge of films might make for a good podcast and might also drum up some extra cash if I interspersed it with ads for BetterHelp or one of those food delivery systems that isn't even available in Europe. So I asked my actor friend Bryan to come over and record a podcast about movies. It didn't go well because Bryan, in an attempt to appear like an intellectual, wanted to dissect Jean Renoir's 1937 cultural touchstone, Le Grand Illusion, whereas I wanted to talk about the Goonies. Bryan said he hadn't seen the Goonies, so I asked him to leave.
You're talking the fucking Goonies! Fuck your fucking Goonies!
Joe's microphone stands are made of sterner stuff. I modelled those in Fusion 360, along with these little these buttons and fucking things that stick on the table. There you go. The microphone stands wiggle around so you can pull them right up to your mouth, brother. I also made some colourful skulls. These were modelled by a chap called Jack Off the Dust, which sounds like something a horny mummy would do. I also made this chimpanzee skull, made by a fella called Shane Against the Machine, who made his one from bits of Zildjian symbols. And to be fair, it's the most impressive piece of tat in that room. One of the more glaring features in this studio is the sign showing Joe being abducted by a flying saucer, made by Roadhouse Relics. I laser cut about 60 different pieces and stuck them all together and painted it. There's Joe being abducted in his shorts. Presumably he was training, working on that fabulous cake. Next I modelled this flying saucer in Fusion 360, and then I gave it a lick of silvery paint. This was made by Designs by Perry. You might be wondering what's up with Joe's obsession with flying saucers. Well, I think I have the answer. You see, Rogan is an Irish name, stemming from the word Rogan, meaning red, and likely originated in this town. And if you'll zoom out, you'll see it's right next to Saucerstown. I took back my car and went to check out these places for myself, but there wasn't much happening there. I would have said the trip was a waste of time, but I was actually on my way to do a gig with my band King Kong Company. The gig was going well until I forgot I wasn't 25 anymore, and I leapt off the stage. Granted, it wasn't a very big jump, and while the medics at the festival had described it as a nasty sprain and allowed me to drive home, a doctor who later reviewed my x-rays suggested surgery was needed to put 3 titanium screws in my ankle. It was painful, distressing, and called for weeks and weeks of uninterrupted rest. But again I was haunted by the words of P.T. Barnum, who said fortune favours the brave and never helps a man who does not help himself. So I strapped on a peg leg and absolutely smashed a load of gigs. And thus began months and months of lying on the couch with my foot elevated, during which time I dreamed of the Italian Renaissance, developed a minor addiction to oxycodone, and spent my evenings being sassy to my supporters over on Patreon. I'd like to thank my patrons. I couldn't do it without you. Artists crediting their patrons has been around for hundreds of years. Botticelli painted his patrons, the Medici family, into the adoration of the Magi. Michelangelo created his epic sculpture of Moses in the likeness of his patron, Pope Julius II, and Guercino referenced the coat of arms of his patrons, the Barberini family, by way of these 3 Bs in his painting of Samson. Guercino means squinter in Italian, as he only had one eye, but he didn't let his disability get the better of him, just like my actor friend Tadhg. Tadhg has appeared in loads of TV and films, and I've enjoyed making various prosthetic eyes for him over the years. I like being friends with Tadhg, but as he is a professional actor, he is prone to wearing pocketless linen pants most, if not all, of the time. This means he rarely carries a wallet, or a phone, or money of any description. And after finally realising that I would be paying for drinks every single time we went out, I asked Tadhg to give me his debit card, which I placed in some acetone to soften the plastic. Then I removed the near-frequency chip, wound up the copper aerial, and set it into a prosthetic eye, which would allow Tadhg to pay for things with his face. I asked Tadhg to join me in my studio, where we could discuss the films we worked on together, while also getting a greater understanding of cinema. What problems do you think guys like us face working in the film industry?
What do you mean, guys like us?
Like guys like you and me, guys like us.
What do you mean, like you and me? Say it.
Tadhg wasn't keen on continuing the podcast, which is fine because I felt well enough to get back to the diorama. I resumed by making this scary mask by Azo Kaiji. I made this by sculpting it full size and then scanning it, printing it small, and then giving it a lick of paint. There appears to be a pile of books on Joe's desk. I could only make out what looks like the beginning of the word artificial, so I extrapolated from that. I also dotted Joe's desk with some other essential reading. That's a copy of my erotic novella, The Power of the Strength of the Heart, available to buy from all these places. You'll hate yourself for getting an erection. To make the lads, I brought the 3D scans into Fusion 360 and stuck their heads onto some bodies that I downloaded from the web. There's me applying Bezos's Bezos. Joe's chair was also available to download, so I stuck it to the lads and printed them, then gave them a wash.
Do you like podcasts?
No.
Next, I apply a transfer of Richard Pryor to Joe's t-shirt. This is so that everyone knows who Joe's comedy hero is. It's the same reason Ricky Gervais jumps into bed every night wearing gym jams covered in pictures of himself. There I am painting Dan's little beard and just dry brushing his fetching teal blouse. The drummer's t-shirt is slightly off-white, white being one of my favourite colours. It's as well as other colours like black and brown and Asian. He's gone a bit grey, but it happens to the best of us. Just finish off his eyebrows there, and I made a little set of spectacles for him too. When all that was done, I transferred the data from the SD card to my laptop to review the footage, and then this happened. I immediately sent the card to a data recovery specialist and was devastated when I was met with bad news. Now I know a lot of you are thinking, oh, you should have backed everything up along the way, but let me remind you, I was high out of my mind for half the fucking time. I imagine the rest of you were saying, but we know that you got the footage back because we're watching it now. But you'd be wrong. What actually happened was I remade the diorama. Every bit of it. And that, my friends, is how I ended up with 2 dioramas. I took one of the dioramas and I put it into a plastic bag. Some of you know why. Others will learn. By now the news of my misfortune had spread all over Limerick, and I was comforted to receive words of support from people. None more so than my acquaintance, Dirk Davis.
I heard you lost all the footage. That's a sickener. I don't know if you know a film called Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky. He lost all his footage, but he said when he redid it, he did it even better. So it could be a blessing in disguise. Anyway, I'm here for if you need anything.
And that, my friends, is how we ended up here. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk about the 1972 film Stalker, which is about a group of lads that go on an adventure to find something very special.
A bit like the Goonies.
Yes, Dirt, exactly like the Goonies.
Russian Goonies.
Russian Goonies. Have you seen the Goonies?
Yeah. I loved it, actually, yeah. We should talk about that on next episode of the podcast.
Yeah.
What's the podcast called?
I don't know. Something to do with films.
Something to do with films. I always liked the quote from Jean Cocteau.
Go on.
He described film as a petrified fountain of thought.
A petrified fountain of thought.
Petrified fountain.
The petrified fountain.
The petrified fountain.
Dirt Fingers. Available on Spotify now. In a damp forest in the west of the world is a hole. And in this hole you'll find a man who has been described as staggeringly gullible, lazily derivative, and a bad boy comedian cover band. And he shares this hole with a pair of men who have been heralded as pop rock sludge, mundane and pedestrian, and a poor man's white stripes. But I'm not going to sling the very mud I shovel, for I too have been lambasted as infantile, self-indulgent, and pure shit. But to misquote P.T. Barnum, I don't care what the papers say about me, as long as they get my name right. On New Year's Eve 2024, when the sun is at its zenith, my actor friend Tadhg will be somewhere in Rogan's town, with the GPS coordinates to the diorama printed across his eyeball. Go there, get the numbers, dig up the lads. Congratulations to my patron Christopher, who found the Fabio diorama in the mountains near San Francisco. None of this is possible without the support from the patrons, so head on over to Patreon, where you can watch all sorts of bonus shit while also supporting my work. And as for the other diorama, I'll stick it up on eBay, pay for these screws in my ankle. See you next time on Bobby Fingers.
Your fracture was in here, which we were talking about. This is your talus. We want to avoid in this ankle is the stiffness.
But I have a good ankle now.
You have a good ankle now.